Good evening. I'm Nima and this is Forum Daily for Monday, November 21st. And tonight, we begin with Federal Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne, who is selling Canada's battery supply chain prowess in Asia again this week. But this time, he has a new boast in his back pocket. A new survey ranks 30 countries with a significant presence in electric vehicle industries, and Canada finished second this year after $15 billion in investments. Mr. Champagne says he has already received a lot of calls about Canada's new battery supply chain position, and he plans to market that to other countries around the globe. The Emergencies Act public inquiry resumed today in Ottawa. Intelligence officials with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service spoke on the Freedom Convoy protest last winter, saying they gave people with all kinds of grievances a chance to unite against a perceived common foe. CSIS officials testifying today say that most of the protesters attending Freedom Convoy blockades and clogging downtown Ottawa likely had no actual connection to the trucking industry. The assessment is part of a report submitted to the Public Order Emergency Commission. It is scrutinizing the government's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act in response to the protests. All right, turning to a shooting at the Ocean Centre Mall in Prince Rupert, BC, which has left one person dead and another critically injured. Police are asking people to stay away from the mall as they gather evidence. Premier David Eby has expressed his concern about the incident, and Police Staff Sergeant David Uppel says they are aware that the shooting will be traumatic for many residents and that help is there for those who will need it. All right, switching gears to a media report that the Prime Minister is refuting. He says he was informed that candidates in the 2019 federal election may have been influenced by financing from the Chinese government. Opposition MPs are demanding to know who the candidates are and what Canada is doing about the interference. At the end of the Francophonie summit in Tunisia yesterday, Mr. Trudeau said the government hasn't identified the candidates publicly because he doesn't know who they are. He says he only learned of the specific allegation from the media. Schools across Ontario are open today after education workers and the province secured a tentative contract and averted a strike. The Canadian Union of Public Employees announced that a weekend of talks between the government and the union were successful, and a tentative deal was offered to its 55,000 education workers. Ratification votes are set to begin on Thursday and are expected to go through next weekend. The CRA is raising awareness around organ donation. People who file taxes in Nunavut and Ontario for the 2022 tax year will have the option of seeking information about organ and tissue donation. The federal government has announced the two jurisdictions have agreed to participate in the service being offered by the Canada Revenue Agency. Less than 1/4 of Canadians are registered as organ and tissue donors, and the Revenue Agency says it is uniquely positioned to help raise awareness around the issue. In the prairies, delegates attending the Legislative Assembly of the Métis Nation Saskatchewan have unanimously supported their leadership's rejection of the Saskatchewan First Act. The legislation looks to unilaterally amend the Constitution to reassert the province's jurisdiction over its natural resources. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations says it ignores treaty rights. Similar legislation is being proposed by Premier Danielle Smith, and all of Alberta's treaty chiefs have spoken out strongly against the proposed act. Well, the results are in, and Green Party members have opted to go with a familiar hand at the helm. Former leader Elizabeth May won the leadership race on the 6th and final ranked ballot last night, and she will run the party with Deputy Leader Jonathan Pedneau, who's an expert on crisis situations. About 22,000 Greens were eligible to vote, but only a little more than 8,000 voted on the first ballot. Coastal communities from the Atlantic seaboard to parts of British Columbia on the west coast are facing the risk of slipping below swelling tides as water levels inch up. John Clack is an earth sciences professor at Simon Fraser University, and he calls it a disaster in slow motion. Adam Fenich is the director of UPEI's Climate Lab, and he says 1,260 kilometers of Prince Edward Island's coastline is at significant risk of erosion. And the Grey Cup will be heading back to Toronto for the first time in 5 years. The Argonauts upset the two-time defending champion Winnipeg Blue Bombers 24-23 on Sunday to win the CFL championship. All right, stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after the break with a look at nuclear power and COP27. We'll be joined by Dr. Chris Keefer, the president of Canadians for Nuclear Energy. The 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference finished up in Egypt on Sunday with no concrete deal on new ways to fight climate change. Struggling nations impacted by extreme weather will get financial help from a loss and damage fund provided by first world countries who are blamed for the pollution causing climate change. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres again pleaded with every country to reduce their dependency on fossil fuels. Meanwhile, nuclear power advocates attended the conference to make their case, including the International Atomic Energy Agency. The International Atomic Energy Agency's Director General's message to leaders was that nuclear is present and a part of the solution. Well, with us now to discuss the reaction to nuclear energy at COP27 is Dr. Chris Keefer, president of Canadians for Nuclear Energy. Dr. Keefer, welcome back to Forum Daily.
It's wonderful being with you again.
So we know you attended COP27 yourself in Egypt. Tell us a little bit more about what the overall sentiment being felt at this year's conference was, especially amid the effects of climate change and Russia's war on Ukraine.
Sure. Well, you mentioned this loss and damage file. This is a meeting of essentially all the nations in the world. And the big division here, of course, is it's between wealthy countries and poor countries. And those poor countries are the most at risk. Because when you industrialize, when you have good roads and good buildings and good electricity infrastructure, if you have a severe weather event, you're more likely to make it through okay. And so, I was very inspired to be there alongside a very diverse group of pro-nuclear advocates, many of them from Africa, who are saying, listen, nuclear power can actually power us to industrialize while also not contributing further to climate change. So it was a really inspiring experience, and wonderful nuclear advocates from all over Africa, Sierra Leone, South Africa, Sudan, and Egypt, of course, which is building a very large set of nuclear stations as we speak.
Now, as you mentioned, nuclear advocates were a strong presence at this year's event. We mentioned the IAEA held its first ever Atoms for Climate Pavilion. So how did the presence of nuclear energy compare to previous COPs?
Well, there were about 60 of us, all volunteers. We went there on our own dime, and we actually had a big impact. So we were in the diplomatic zone, talking with politicians, talking with media, talking with NGOs and policymakers. And the language of the final draft was impacted by our activities because it excluded nuclear energy at first in terms of the potential solutions that could be funded through the Loss and Damage Fund. And through our actions, nuclear energy was actually included there. So I'm incredibly proud of that.
Tell us a little bit more about those actions and what the main points being given out by the International Atomic Energy Agency and other nuclear energy advocates were.
Listen, our main point is that nuclear energy in the fight against climate change should not be controversial and really is not controversial when you listen to the experts such as the IPCC. All four of their principal decarbonization pathways call for a 100 to 500% increase in the use of nuclear energy because it is such an important tool. It's so capable of phasing out fossil fuels, which is exactly what we did here in Ontario. We accomplished North America's greatest greenhouse gas reduction using nuclear for 90% of the energy to permanently phase out coal. And we're an example for the world. And it was exciting to be able to be there and share that message.
So how does Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine, its power, its influence in the fuel industry, we know what's going on with the Nord Stream pipeline explosions and, of course, Europe's energy crisis. How does all of this play into the conversation around nuclear energy at COP27?
Well, Europe obviously made a massive mistake here, and that was because they relied so heavily, hooking themselves up really like an addict to Russian gas. And they thought that this was a safe bet, that Russia wouldn't do the unthinkable, and it has. Now, how does nuclear energy fit into all this? Well, nuclear energy provides energy security because you have 2 years of fuel inside your reactor, and you can store a lot more on site easily because uranium is 1,000,000 times more energy dense than coal. So that is responsible for a big turn amongst European countries back towards nuclear. Big announcements, for instance, especially on Russia's border, Romania investing heavily in nuclear, Poland starting a nuclear program for the first time, Estonia with similar plans. So it was a big part of the conversation.
All right, Dr. Keefer, just about 45 seconds left here, but what are you keeping your eyes on as COP27 has ended and, as you say, other countries are expanding their nuclear presence?
Listen, I'm very optimistic. The conversation is changing rapidly. And right here in Canada, we're seeing a real phase shift from governments. We are extending and probably refurbishing for another 30 years the Pickering Nuclear Station, which is an excellent move. And there was that $1 billion funding announcement for the West's first SMR occurring here in Darlington in Ontario. So I'm optimistic, I'm excited, and I think these young volunteer youth voices are having a big impact.
Lots of developments to keep our eyes on. Dr. Keefer, again, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break. And when we return, we're going to be taking a look at a new disturbing report about monkey abuse in the coconut industry. PETA Asia has uncovered evidence of abuse and mistreatment of monkeys in Thailand's coconut product industry. We'll have more on that research after the break. A disturbing investigation by PETA Asia finds that young monkeys in Thailand are being chained and abusively trained to get coconuts used to make coconut products that are sold in North America. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals is advocating for a boycott of coconut products connected to rampant abuse of monkey labor, in which monkeys are forced to pick heavy coconuts for long hours. The organization points out that meal delivery company HelloFresh in particular is using such coconut products. In photos and videos collected by PETA, monkeys can be seen being chained, whipped, and beaten. This with coconut pickers revealing that some monkeys incur broken bones from falling off of trees or being yanked by handlers. Well, joining us now to tell us more about this is the lead on this case, Mr. Jason Baker, Vice President at PETA Asia. Mr. Baker, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me.
Some very shocking details in this report, Mr. Baker, especially considering that Thailand is the third largest producer of coconut milk in the world. But what really shocked me here is that PETA investigators revealed these realities of monkey labor in Thailand in 2019. So why has there been no change in this cruel practice yet?
We did. The first investigation was smaller, and with each ongoing investigation, we learned more. This recent investigation we had 154 meetings. We went across the industry. So more than just Chowco and Aroy D, we saw it was industry wide. And that's where we linked HelloFresh or Taste of Thai, all brands that come from Thailand are linked in some way to monkey abuse and monkey capture, and it's horrific. And you would never think. I mean, I've been to Thailand many times. You would never think that they have monkeys picking coconuts, and it's not every product. It's not every farm that's using monkeys, but a lot of them. And there's thousands of monkeys, and they're being taken from the wild, and they're being chained up, kept behind homes, living miserable lives, just to be picking machines.
And we mentioned some of the abuse that these monkeys incur. You also mentioned in this research that they're taken at a very young age. So what happens to them when they get older? How does this affect them in the long term, their mental health, etc.?
Yeah, so it's illegal to take them from the wild, but the government turns a blind eye. And when they reach about age 3 and they become more aggressive, they will often chain them, leave them chained out in the wild, out in the field. They'll send them to circuses, or they often they're just abandoned. So it's a terrible problem that the government has let go on for a very long time, and they've known for years and taken almost no action. And that's why we're calling for a boycott of Thai products.
All right. Well,
Thai
on
coconut
that,
products.
on the advocacy around a boycott of HelloFresh and subsidiaries such as Green Chef, what kind of response have you gotten from this company as of yet, if any?
That's the shocking thing, because before we went public, we showed them the videos, we showed them the undercover footage, and we showed their suppliers specifically talking about supplying them, showed them the monkeys that are being used, and their response was to do nothing. And so I think when the public finds out, they're going to be shocked, because there are a lot of other options these days. The Philippines and Indonesia are bigger producers of coconut milk. Uh, you've got a choice. When you're looking at the shelf, if it says product of Thailand, if you're looking at coconut milk and it says product of Thailand, put it back.
And are there any other coconut products connected to monkey labor in Thailand that are available in Canada that our viewers should know about?
Yeah, I mean, it's Taste of Thai, Thai Fresh are major brands that are sold across um, uh, uh, those are the ones you would find in everyday grocery stores, but literally it's all coconut products from Thailand. So it doesn't matter if it's a big brand or a small brand, they're all linked to using monkeys.
Right, all coconut products from Thailand. Just about a minute
Mhm.
left here, sir. But as you mentioned, Thai industry officials are attempting to mislead global retailers and consumers around the continued use of monkey labor. So, how how can consumers really identify if a product is connected to the unethical treatment of animals?
Right. Well, I mean, there's two things that the consumers need to be doing. There's one is the industry will and the government will listen when we use our pocketbooks. So when we are not buying these products, things will change quickly. But also, people need to be talking to their grocery stores. If you see the products from coconut products from Thailand in the stores, talk to your store manager. Ask them to stock other products. Ask them to talk to the producer about changing things and getting action taken. Additionally, people can go to PETA's website and see the video for themselves. They can see ways of reaching out to the Thai government to push for change that way, because that's really those two things are how change is going to happen.
All right, Mr. Baker, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thank you very much.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. And when we return, we're going to be taking a look at the major news stories and headlines from around the world. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. A strong, shallow earthquake has toppled buildings and walls on Indonesia's densely populated main island. It killed at least 162 people and injured hundreds of others. Officials were gathering information on the toll of those injured and killed by the quake in the remote area. West Java's governor says the number of confirmed dead has risen to 162, including many children. He says more than 13,000 people whose homes had been heavily damaged were taken to evacuation centers. All right, well, this comes as Ukrainian authorities are evacuating Kherson residents out of the city. They fear Russian forces have damaged energy infrastructure too broadly to allow for a safe winter. Soldiers have started moving civilians to the neighboring province of Mykolaiv. The Ukrainian government is offering people transportation, accommodations, and medical care. Russia has been pounding Ukraine's power grid and other infrastructure from the air. It's causing widespread blackouts and leaving millions of Ukrainians without heat, power, or water. Meanwhile, an official says suspected Kurdish militants in Syria have fired 5 rockets into a border town in Turkey. They have killed 2 people and wounded 10 others. Anadolu Agency reports the rockets struck a high school and 2 houses in the town of Karkamış, as well as a truck near a Turkish-Syrian border gate. The rocket attacks came days after Turkey launched deadly airstrikes over northern regions of Syria and Iraq. Turkey was targeting Kurdish groups that Ankara holds responsible for a November 13th bomb attack in Istanbul. All right, well, south of our border, the 5 victims of a shooting at an LGBTQ plus club in Colorado Springs over the weekend are being mourned as police continue to investigate the motive. The suspect was tackled to the ground by people inside the nightclub, and he is in police custody. He is facing murder and hate charges. A vigil was held in Orlando yesterday by members of the One Pulse Foundation, which was started in the aftermath of the 2016 mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. While the situation continues to worsen in Afghanistan, a senior official with the International Committee of the Red Cross says that Afghans will struggle for their lives as the country braces for its second winter under Taliban rule. Red Cross Operations Director Martin Schwepp says Afghanistan is facing plummeting humanitarian conditions. He says the economic situation is set to become worse as the Taliban face international isolation and sanctions. 7 decades after the UK detonated a nuclear bomb in the Indian Ocean, the nation is honoring troops who took part. The soldiers who participated, sometimes unknowingly, in the country's atomic weapons tests are being recognized with a medal. The Nuclear Test Medal comes after years of campaigning from friends and families of veterans who are calling for better recognition. Well, it looks like Disney is getting a new boss. Bob Iger is the enterprising entertainment executive who brought Star Wars, Pixar, and Marvel under the Disney marquee. He will replace outgoing CEO Bob Chapek. Mr. Chapek's 2-year tenure has been marked by clashes, missteps, and a weakening financial performance. This comes as Disney's quarterly financial performance fell well short of Wall Street expectations. Shares of the Walt Disney Company are down 40% this year. Well, as the World Cup kicks off, FIFA's threat of on-field punishment for players have forced World Cup teams to abandon armband plans. The teams planned for their captains to wear armbands that were seen as a rebuke to host nation Qatar's human rights record. FIFA warned players wearing the One Love armbands would immediately be shown yellow cards. NASA's Orion capsule has reached the moon, whipping around the backside on its way to a record-breaking lunar orbit. Now, because of the half-hour communication blackout, flight controllers in Houston did not know if the critical engine firing went well until the capsule emerged from behind the moon. The capsule will spend close to a week in lunar orbit before heading home. It's the first time a capsule has visited the moon since NASA's Apollo program 50 years ago. Well, back on Earth, a British Columbia First Nation has teamed up with researchers to create a biodegradable packing material similar to styrofoam. The Wet'suwet'en First Nation in central BC has too much wood waste on its land from wildfires and beetle kill. The First Nation has partnered with University of BC researchers to use those raw materials to produce a product called biofoam. Researchers say biofoam takes about 2 months to break down in soil, compared to the 500 years it takes styrofoam to decompose. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, be sure to visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and make sure to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.